This man thought he was sitting next to a nobody in first class, so he mocked him, insulted him, and tried to humiliate him in front of everyone. But what he didn't know was this. Within minutes, the entire plane would discover the truth, and his face would turn pale with regret. Because the quiet man he looked down on was someone the world already respected. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive into what really happened. No one in the first-class cabin expected drama at 35,000 feet above the ground. The plane was calm, almost peaceful. Soft instrumental music flowed through expensive noise-cancelling headphones. The low hum of the engines blended smoothly with quiet conversations. Flight attendants moved gracefully between rows, offering drinks with polite smiles. Everything felt perfect, luxurious, controlled, elite. That's when a sharply dressed businessman settled deeper into his wide leather seat and glanced to his right. What he saw immediately annoyed him. The man sitting beside him looked ordinary. Casual jacket. Simple shirt. Worn boots. No flashy watch. No designer luggage. Nothing that screamed money, power, or importance. In a cabin filled with tailored suits and luxury accessories, this man stood out for one reason: he didn't seem to belong. The businessman slowly rolled his eyes. Seriously, he muttered under his breath. They let anyone sit in first class now. He expected a reaction. Maybe embarrassment. Maybe anger. But the man beside him didn't respond. Instead, he quietly looked out the airplane window, watching clouds drift by, calm and relaxed, as if the world inside the cabin didn't concern him at all. His posture was easy. His expression peaceful. Almost content. That silence bothered the businessman even more. He leaned closer, a small smirk forming on his face, his tone sharp with arrogance. "You know," he said, loud enough to be heard. "Some of us actually worked hard to earn our seat here." Still nothing. No argument. No defense. Not even eye contact. The businessman scoffed, shaking his head slightly, convinced he was superior. In his mind, status was everything. Money defined value. Appearance determined worth. And this quiet man clearly failed all three tests. What the businessman didn't know, what he couldn't see through his narrow judgment, was that the calm man sitting beside him didn't need to prove anything. Because the truth was simple, and it was powerful. The man he had already dismissed, mocked, and judged in his mind was Keanu Reeves. And within minutes, that truth would change everything. As the flight climbed higher into the clouds, the tension in the first-class cabin slowly began to shift, though no one noticed yet. The businessman, clearly irritated by the quiet presence of the man beside him, couldn't stop talking. His voice was low but sharp, dripping with superiority, and he seemed determined to make his opinion heard. "Honestly," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else, "these freeloaders think they can just slip into first class. Fake rich people. People who didn't earn anything. And the worst part, society rewards them. The world is upside down." Every word was pointed. Every phrase seemed aimed directly at the calm man next to him. He leaned back, clearly imagining that the other man would squirm under the weight of his judgment. But the man beside him didn't react. He simply maintained a soft, composed expression, gazing out the airplane window as if the businessman's words didn't exist. His calmness was almost unsettling, a quiet reminder that not everything could be controlled. Then a flight attendant approached, moving gracefully down the aisle. She stopped at the man's seat, her face warm and respectful. "Mr. Reeves," she said politely, "would you like your usual tea?" The businessman's jaw dropped slightly, but he tried to hide it with a stifled laugh. "Wow," he whispered under his breath, shaking his head, "they even play along now." Keanu, as calm and polite as ever, simply smiled softly and thanked her. No fanfare. No show of ego. Just a quiet acknowledgement. The businessman, not ready to accept the situation, leaned in further. "Let me guess," he said sarcastically, a smirk on his face, "you're an actor? Or maybe some motivational speaker?" Finally, Keanu turned to him, meeting his gaze with a gentle, unassuming smile. "No," he said softly. "I just like to travel quietly." That smile should have been a warning. It carried confidence without arrogance, a quiet power that didn't need to prove itself. But the businessman ignored it. He continued pushing, his words sharp and blunt. "You don't belong here," he said. "This section is for people who matter." Keanu simply nodded, his calm presence unshaken. He didn't argue. He didn't retaliate. His quiet dignity spoke louder than any insult ever could. And in that moment, it became painfully clear. The businessman had no idea the storm he was about to face midway through the flight. Just as the businessman was preparing his next insult, a sudden announcement echoed through the cabin. The captain's calm, authoritative voice filled the air. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we would like to make a special acknowledgement today. We are honored to have Keanu Reeves on board with us." For a moment, the entire first-class cabin froze. The soft hum of the engines and the faint sound of music seemed to vanish. Heads slowly turned toward the man sitting quietly by the window. Whispers started spreading like wildfire, quiet at first, then growing louder. "Wait. Keanu Reeves." A passenger murmured. "John Wick." Another whispered. "The Matrix guy." A third voice exclaimed under its breath. The businessman's smug expression vanished instantly. His face went pale, and the confident smirk he had worn for the last hour disappeared. He was frozen in disbelief, his mind racing, trying to process the reality of the man he had been insulting. The quiet, unassuming man beside him, the one he had judged, mocked, and dismissed, was not just anyone. He was one of the most respected and beloved actors in the world, a man known not only for his iconic roles but also for his humility and kindness. Keanu, as always, remained calm. He stood for a moment, waved politely at the cabin, acknowledging the attention without a hint of arrogance or ego. Then, just as quietly as he had accepted it, he sat back down. No pride. No grand gesture. No attempt to show off. His simple, graceful reaction said more about him than words ever could. The businessman's throat felt dry. He swallowed hard, trying to find something to say, but the words faltered. I didn't realize," he stammered, barely audible. Keanu turned to him, his expression gentle, calm, and forgiving. "That's okay," he said softly. "Most people don't." Even in that moment of revelation, there was no anger. No scolding. Just quiet, unwavering dignity. The businessman had finally seen the truth, and it hit harder than any insult he could have ever imagined. But little did he know, the story wasn't over yet. The real lesson, the one that would leave everyone on the plane in awe, was still about to unfold. After the plane touched down, passengers slowly gathered their belongings, chatting quietly about their flight. But for one man, the flight had become unforgettable, and for all the wrong reasons. The businessman, still reeling from the earlier revelation, followed the crowd toward the airport exit. He was lost in thought, replaying the moments over and over in his head, the insults, the arrogance, the smug smile he had worn for so long. He felt a knot of regret growing in his stomach, heavier with every step. Then, he noticed something unusual. A group of airport staff, security personnel, and even airline executives moved purposefully toward one passenger. It wasn't him. It was the quiet man he had spent the entire flight judging. "Mr. Reeves," one of the staff greeted warmly. "Thank you again for your donation. The Children's Hospital truly appreciates it." The businessman's ears widened. Donation. Hospital. Charity. His mind raced. The man he had insulted, mocked, and dismissed, the one who seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable, had quietly given millions, helped others without seeking attention, and earned the respect of people who mattered most. For the first time, he truly understood. This wasn't just a famous actor sitting beside him. This was a man of humility, kindness, and integrity. Someone who treated everyone with respect, regardless of their status or wealth. And all the arrogance, all the judgment he had displayed, suddenly felt unbearable. The businessman felt smaller than ever. His ego, which had seemed so unshakable, crumbled completely. Heart pounding, he stepped forward, unsure if he even deserved to speak. I'm sorry," he said sincerely, his voice shaking. "I judged you because of how you looked." Keanu turned to him, smiling softly. It wasn't a proud smile. It wasn't a condescending smile. It was kind, calm, and understanding. That happens a lot, Keanu said gently. But it's okay. Just remember, you never know what someone is carrying inside. Then, as quietly as he had moved through the world, Keanu walked away. No fanfare. No ego. Just grace and humility. The businessman stood there, watching him go, realizing that this single encounter had changed him forever. He had learned a lesson that money couldn't buy, a lesson that no arrogance or pride could ever teach. Sometimes, the most powerful people don't announce their greatness, they simply live it quietly, and in doing so, leave the rest of the world to catch up. That businessman never forgot that flight. Not because he had met a famous actor, not because he had shared a seat with someone from Hollywood, and certainly not because he could brag about the encounter later. He remembered it because of what he had witnessed. Humility in its purest, most unassuming form. For the entire journey, Keanu Reeves had remained calm, polite, and composed. He had not argued, not defended himself, and certainly had not insulted back. The businessman's words, full of judgment and arrogance, could have sparked anger, resentment, or dramatic reaction. But instead, Keanu simply let the truth reveal itself. And that truth was more powerful than anything the businessman could have imagined. It didn't need to be announced. It didn't need flashy signs, loud speeches, or display of wealth. It was quietly felt, quietly understood, and quietly respected. The businessman realized something important that day. Real class isn't about sitting in a first-class seat. It isn't about expensive watches, designer suits, or the appearance of importance. Real class is about how you treat others, how you carry yourself, and how you live your life without needing recognition. Real wealth isn't counted in money, stocks, or luxury cars. Real wealth is measured by kindness, generosity, and integrity, by the lives you touch quietly, without expecting a single thank you. And real importance. It isn't announced with a loud voice or flashing lights. Real importance is felt. It's recognized in the small gestures, the quiet acts of respect, and the way someone lifts others without ever demanding attention. The businessman had judged someone by appearances and learned the hard way that the quietest person in the room is often the one worth paying attention to. The one whose impact is invisible to the eyes but deeply powerful to the heart. So the next time you're tempted to make assumptions about someone based on what you see, remember this story. Remember the calm man beside the window. Remember the lesson that hit harder than any insult, louder than any word. Humility, integrity, and quiet strength are far more important than appearances. Sometimes, the most extraordinary people are the ones who ask for nothing, expect nothing, and simply live with dignity, leaving the rest of the world to discover their greatness. And that realization, it changes everything.